So when I'm asked what my approach to teaching personal statement and college essay writing is, I really feel that this is a potentially transformative process. And I think that it's really worth the time that students spend. I think that they learn a whole lot about writing. They learn a whole lot about themselves, and they come out on the other side of it better. I wouldn't be a college essay guy, or spending all of my time thinking about this if I didn't believe that. So that's kind of part one. And in terms of like the practical part of like, how do we help students tell their stories? I think it really begins. So let's say two parts, right? It starts with brainstorming the what, what is going to be the content? And then we get into the how, the structure. And I think sometimes students rush to the how before they've really got the what figured out. And so I think it starts with great brainstorming. And I think that if students do rush to the how too soon, they sometimes like pick the first topic that comes to mind and they take off 100 miles an hour down a path that's like, maybe going to work, but they get really frustrated. And so it's kind of like a stitch in time saves nine. If we spend time on quality brainstorming, I think it's going to save us a lot of time, and it's going to lead to better stories. So the personal statement brainstorming exercise that are my favorite, I've got 5. The first one is called the values exercise. And it just involves, here's a big list of values. And I want you to spend a minute or two coming up with your list of top 10 values. And any student can do this. Okay. I've done this hundreds of times in different workshops, and maybe more than hundreds. And, students can do this, parents can do this. This is really great for just, counselors too. What are my core values right now? So that's workshop 1 or exercise 1, if I'm giving a workshop. And then exercise 2, there's one that I love to do called the essence objects exercise. And this one's kind of fun. It gets us into creative mode, thinking about what are the tangible ways that these values manifest themselves in the world. So one of my essence objects would be, for example, I've got a couple on my desk actually related to my daughter. One of them is these beads that my community painted for my daughter as a part of her baby shower. And this to me represents my love for my community, my love from my community for my daughter, even before she was born. I'm getting a little choked up sharing about it. So that's one that represents some core values: community, connection. There's another one that I have, this bracelet here that my wife gave to me. I'm all tearful that my wife gave to me that represents our connection. She's my best friend. It wears off every year and she makes me a new one on my birthday. So that represents this sort of remaking ritual. Anyway, you get the idea. So I encourage students to think about what are your essence objects? What are the things that are really meaningful? It's a great way of getting at vulnerability, especially for students who aren't necessarily comfortable, revealing personal facts and details about themselves. The third exercise that's really good, especially for supplemental essays, generating content, is called the 21 details exercise. It involves coming up with a list of 21 random facts about yourself, and the randomer, the better. And not putting too much on it. You never quite know where that's going to go. By the third one, you're like, okay, I got some stuff. But by the 17th one, you're really getting into like the weird corners of your life and coming up with some stuff. So that's one that I love. And then there's one that's a little more directed at the college process. That's called the Everything I Want Colleges to Know About Me list, which is just as it sounds. You take a blank sheet of paper and you just make a list of all the random things, not random things, but all the things that you feel like you really want a college to know about you by the end of the application. And then the fifth one, if I had to just only pick 5, is something called the feelings and needs exercise. And this exercise is good for students who have experienced challenges and are trying to determine if the challenges they've experienced are going to be, essay worthy or, make a good topic. When students ask me, is this a good topic or not? I'm like, do the feelings and needs exercise. And I don't have time to explain it in this video, but you can Google it. You'll also find it inside Writable. So it starts with good brainstorming, not just good brainstorming, quality brainstorming. And I think students should spend at least half an hour, ideally more, doing some of these exercises. Once they've done that, they'll generate kind of like what I call a menu of essay topics. And then we move on to structure. Now, I think that there are 2 possible structures. A student is either writing about a challenge they've experienced, or they're not. And in most cases, they're not. And I don't have a preference for either. And we have to like stress this with our students often, right? Like, you don't have to write about whatever the worst thing that happened to you. In fact, it's sometimes a mistake to do that. There are a bunch of different possibilities of topics that you can choose. And over the last few months, I spent a while, this is the beginning of the pandemic, looking at 300 past essays and figuring out how did students arrive at their topics. And what I found is there were 7 different paths that about more than 60% of students were choosing. And so here they are. The 7, I call these the montage paths, which a montage is just jumping around in space and time, and you're connecting it with a common theme in the personal statement. So it could be the what I call the I love or I know path, where a student's writing about something that they really love or care about or can talk about for hours. You've also got what I call the essence objects path, which is like taking some of those objects that are really meaningful to them and connect them to different sides of their personality, or what I call like the islands of personality. We've also got, the skill or superpower essay. So something that you're really good at, and how does that quality manifest in different areas of your life? Then you've got the career path, which is pretty self-explanatory, but it's like, I really want to be an endodontist, or I want to study art history, and here are all the moments that led me up to that one. It often overlaps with the supplemental why major essay. The 5th one we've got is what I call the identities essay, which is like, here's a way that I identify. I identify as Greek or queer or a dancer, or, hopefully not too much on dance because that's a pretty common topic, but how do these different identities manifest themselves in your life? And then the 6th one is called the home path, which is like, here is a place that I find to be home. It could be the weight room, or it could be many different homes. And each one of those kind of shows a different side of you. And then finally, we've got what I call the uncommon extracurricular activity path. So we're not talking about debate. We're not talking about dance, football. I'm talking about some of those more unusual things like stamp collecting or juggling, or, as one student wrote last year, medieval blacksmithing. Like, what? That's going to help you stand out. I don't personally recommend that students choose common extracurricular activities for their personal statement, because in many cases, they're going to be writing about that for their supplemental essays. And also, I just think it's a lot harder to stand out. So that's my overall approach. One final thing I'll say about this is that I think that the content and the structure are so much more important than the grammar. Yes, grammar is important. I'm a grammar nerd too. But I think that especially when we're working on a personal statement, if you're a student at the start, or if you're giving feedback on one, focusing on the content and the structure early on is so much more important. If we can figure out what those are and get clear on that side of things, then a lot of those other minor, lower level concerns kind of take care of themselves. So that's my approach.